Good afternoon. This is Greg Krasovsky, and today I want to talk to you about international family law services that my law offices provide, both in Washington, D.C. and in Moscow, Russia. Well, let's see where it all starts. Usually it starts with introductions. People meet someone in person, these days through social media, even internet dating sites. Anyway, you've met someone. And there's an international component. You've met someone who's a citizen or a permanent resident of another country. Or you're planning to travel, maybe with someone you've met, your boyfriend or girlfriend, to another country. Sooner or later, you're going to hit international family law issues. One of the things that comes up with clients is, especially with men from America, internet dating sites have become very popular. So people meet women in other countries through these internet dating sites. Often things work out, sometimes things don't. But my advice to you is make sure you're represented by a lawyer. You have some legal advice and legal support along the way. Number one, you want to make sure that you're working with a reputable internet dating agency. So if you ask me and my staff, we can do the due diligence. You also want to make sure that you're actually interacting and communicating with the person that you think you are. They've had cases, they've even had documentaries on various TV networks and documentary films that talk about men from many developed countries, Europe, the United States, Canada, Australia, who would start corresponding with women from the former Soviet Union or other Eastern European countries. And they would get ripped off because they thought they were communicating with Natasha. Wasn't the case. They were communicating with Nikolai, who was using a photo he found somewhere on the internet. And people would get scammed for money. They would think they were sending money to help Natasha with her health care. Her mother is sick, or she's sick. Wasn't true. So call us. I'm a former police officer. I usually give people the benefit of the doubt, but I'm also cautious. And I'm willing to perform due diligence work on behalf of clients to make sure that people are being honest with you and your interests and rights are protected. So you met someone, now you want to go meet them. You're going to need advice to make sure that you're in compliance with the local laws of the country where you're going to travel to. That's usually if an entry visa is required. You have to know how to honestly and properly fill out visa forms. Otherwise, you could be accused of visa fraud if you've provided any untruthful information. And once you arrive in a country, same thing. You want to make sure that you're in compliance with local laws that deal with the presence of foreigners in the country, whether these are temporary visitors or people who are even there on work visas or other private invitations. Often there are laws on the books that mandate. I'm not just talking about providing various biometrical data. I'm talking about making sure that you're also in compliance with local laws that deal with registration. In other words, if you're going to stay somewhere, you have to register with the local police. And that's important too, within a certain time period. Otherwise, you could face administrative fines that could even lead to deportation. Due diligence is an important component if you're considering an engagement, because we want to make sure that you have all the right and truthful information, even concerning questions that you may be embarrassed to ask of the person that you've met. Former past criminal records, arrests, convictions, sentences, probation, parole, scary things, but you want to make sure you have truthful information, not just in regard to the person that you're dating, but also in regard to their family. Because once you start a relationship, it's not just with an isolated single person. You're starting a relationship with that person and their close friends and their relatives. So imagine if you meet someone, nice, normal, good-looking person, kind, intelligent, educated, but her brother has been convicted of homicide and released early on parole, and he's residing with her. That may want to, make you think about how safe you'll feel by staying at the apartment. That's just a silly example, but there are issues that you need to deal with. Because often, especially in poor countries, and we have a number of countries in the former Soviet Union that are very poor these days, certain regions especially, people become very desperate and will often exploit any sources of money, especially if these are foreign sources of money. The other due diligence work that we'll do, it has to do with, if you're starting a family, considering starting a family with someone who already has children, who's been in prior marriages, well, let's make sure that those prior divorces have been finalized. So we've had a number of cases where my clients have, well, they thought they had a legitimate marriage to someone who was properly divorced. Turned out not to be the case. Therefore, your current marriage could be considered bigamous and invalid under the law of many jurisdictions. If you met someone who has children, well, we'll help you find out about physical custody, legal custody, visitation rights, child support payments of the child in question. Because like I've said, you are not going to be marrying just a person. You're going to marry a family. And if they have children, even if you don't adopt those children and become their father or their mother, you're still going to have to deal with issues with the other parent, with the biological parent of that child. And you don't want to get yourself into a situation where you may be involved, even inadvertently, in violating someone else's parental rights. Or you don't want to be in a situation where you've assumed that the other parent is going to fulfill certain obligations that come to visitation, spending time with the child or providing child support, and they're not. And now you may have to be the one to foot the bill for legal costs to help protect the child's rights and to enforce child support and other payments. If you're serious with an engagement, then you also have to deal with immigration law consequences. If you're marrying someone from another country, you're either going to join them in their country or they're going to join you where you live. That requires immigration visas, residence permits, and eventually even considerations when it comes to obtaining second citizenship. If second citizenship is permitted by that country. Some countries do not permit you to have a second passport. That's illegal. That can lead to you either losing your current citizenship or incurring administrative fines or even be subject to criminal prosecution. So, important questions. Also, to make sure that ahead of time, you know what the time scope will be to get all this paperwork done. Because often people think, like in the old days, hey, I married someone. It's not like a Las Vegas wedding where you marry someone in the chapel and you can travel around the world the next day. No. You may marry someone in their local country, and then you have to wait 6 or 8 months or even 12 months for them to obtain an immigration visa so they can join you in your country. What if that person can't obtain an immigration visa because there are certain things in their background, criminal records, or crimes that are called of moral turpitude, or other issues? What if they've worked somewhere where they've had some sort of secret clearance or government clearance, and they may be prohibited by law from leaving the country? All sorts of issues come up that people don't think of when they immediately fall in love, because you're obviously concentrating on the romantic aspect. You're emotionally involved. You're not thinking about all these things, and this is where a lawyer can be useful. So, anyway, if you have international family law issues, give us a call. The other area that I didn't talk about is for people who have already been married. You've married someone. They may be your fellow citizen or citizen of another country. You've traveled abroad. Maybe things didn't work out. You're contemplating getting divorced, or you're already in divorce proceedings. Now you're thinking about, okay, what do we do about distribution of marital property? What do we do about custody of our children, visitation? Where would the children live? How are we going to figure all these things out? My approach is a very mediated one, because my whole goal is, no matter what we do, we have to, first of all, try to protect the family, save the marriage. And number two, you really want to make sure that the children are protected and the least affected by anything that happens between spouses. So we try to negotiate things out. Legal proceedings in courts are the last resort, and if they do happen, then hopefully you've already reached an arrangement that the court can just simply formalize and finalize in many jurisdictions. Because if you don't work these things out, then you may fall into a category of clients that we've had. They'll fall into the category of international parental abductions. And that's just a really sad area. Because what this talks about is when one parent takes the child without the permission of another parent and takes them to another country or decides to stay. So we've had cases where people have been they've had children even outside of marriage, or they've simply had a common law marriage. In other words, they've cohabited together for a number of years. They've had a child. And we've also had a case where people have had bona fide legitimate marriages. They either divorce or they have a legal separation. One of the spouses decides to travel to his or her home country for a month or two. And the month or two all of a sudden becomes 6 months or a year. And what does that do? That creates problems, because then the other parent says, well, wait a minute. I thought you were going to be there for a month. I want to see my child. And the other spouse says, no, I've changed my mind. I've thought about it. I want to live in my home country. I want to live somewhere else with the child. And all of a sudden, instead of having a joint decision made ahead of time, now you've just simply gotten the memo, as they say. The decisions have been made for you. And often the aggrieved parent will say, well, wait a minute. What you've done is you've abducted the child. You've taken the child somewhere without my permission. And now I'm going to seek recourse, either with local law enforcement or in the courts. And all of a sudden you have a serious international family law dispute. So the whole goal is to prevent these things. And if they've already happened, to try to resolve them. If people are amenable to compromise. If no one wants to compromise, or if someone is clearly in the wrong, then there's no choice. You really do have to seek legal protection from the courts, from law enforcement, from social services and child protection services agencies, and from other organizations, including even counselor departments of your country. So all these things we can help you with to make sure that you have a good, healthy, prosperous international family law relationship. And if not, then we'll try to help you protect your rights. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you again.